Welcome to the Fall World Language Webinar Series, Implementation of the World Language Essential Standards. Today, we're focusing on two of our essential standards, Essential Standard number 1, Interpersonal Communication, and Essential Standard number 3, Presentational Communication. Today's agenda, as you can see on the screen, includes a brief welcome and overview of our high five and bridging documents. Our high five are the 5 things we're focusing on as we roll through our 2020-2021 school year and make sure we're meeting all the needs of our students. After we do that, we're going to have 2 different sections with guest speakers to share with you. The first person will be talking about the implementation of World Language Essential Standard number 1, the Interpersonal Communication Standard. And the second person will be talking about the implementation of World Language Essential Standard number 3, Presentational Communication. At the end, we have some reminders and announcements for world language educators in general, and then we'll do a wrap up and take any remaining questions that we haven't already addressed as we've gone through our broadcast today. Let's take a look on this slide and talk a little bit about the control panel. The control panel probably looks something similar to what you see there, where you see the slides on your screen, and then usually to the right-hand side, you'll see whoever the host or panelist is that's talking. So you probably see my initials. This is Anne Marie Gunter, your World Languages Consultant. Beneath that, you have a control panel and some different features. So I just want to remind everyone that WebEx is accessible online and via app. So whether you're logged onto a computer or logged onto a smart device, you should be able to see approximately the same things on your screen. All participants are on mute for recording purposes. And the control panel on the side displays, as I said, the host or speaker, the polling questions periodically when we have those, and then the Q&A and chat. You also have some buttons at the bottom of your screen that look similar to what you see here coming up. I want to remind you that the little button in the middle that has a question mark on it goes to our Q&A. You should also have a chat button. If you send anything through chat that you want everyone to see, be sure you go ahead and indicate that you want to go to all panelists or all attendees, whichever feature you have. And you can always send us a more individual question in the Q&A. We'll be watching both as we go throughout the broadcast. You also have different buttons there on the screen. Notice you have a button that has 3 little dots, and as we know in our virtual world, more features are available when you hit something like the little dots. So I will let you explore that as you need to. When we're done today at 5:30, you'll hit that button that's a red button with an X in it, and that exits you out of our broadcast today. So those are your buttons on your control panel, and I'm going to encourage you to use those as you need to throughout our broadcast today. All right, so let's start with a polling question. Why did you join the broadcast today? And you can check all that apply. I always like to know what everyone's motivations are. Was it to access professional development made especially for world languages? Was it to earn 1.5 contact hours for license renewal? Was it to gather information to share with maybe your department, a team, your school, or your district? Was it to learn about resources for this school year? Or do you need to ask a question about the state standards or policy? I'll go ahead and run our polling question so that you can answer that. Remember, it's going to show up in your control panel to the right-hand side, and you can click on the answers that you would like to enter. You can choose one or more than one, depending on what applies for you today and what your goals are for being here with us this afternoon. All right, we've got 20 more seconds. Looks like a few of you still need to answer. One of the things that gets you credit for attending today and participating in our live broadcast, of course, for your license renewal credits is to make sure you're actively participating, taking part in the polls, asking questions, and doing the activities that we're sharing with you this afternoon. All right, we've got a few more seconds so you can get those answers in. All right. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go ahead and show you the results. And we have quite a variety here today, although it looks like everyone's here for different reasons. Great. As you can see in your control panel, you should be seeing the poll results as we speak. 20 of you, so quite a few, are here to access professional development made for world languages. And that is one of the main reasons we do our world language webinar series, so that we have something very specific to world language learning and the different types of programs we have across the state K-12. Also, about half of you are here to earn 1.5 contact hours for license renewal. As I said, once you actively participate in a broadcast, we do send that. That'll come via email with a certificate attached. We usually try to confirm our attendance list and get those out within about a week or two. So that will come to you in time. Please be patient. We have switched to a new system this year. So those of you who are used to getting that 2 hours afterwards, we have moved away from that software. And we actually do it so that we can make sure you get the email you need and it has the attached certificate. It is 1.5 hours today because this is an hour-and-a-half long broadcast. A little bit longer to accommodate 2 different standards and a close look at them. All right, also in the poll, it looks like there's about a third of you who are here to gather information to share with someone else, your department, a team, your school or district, and the same number of people who are here just to learn about resources for this school year and how you might use that in your classrooms or programs. So that's great. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will go ahead then and move on to our next bit. I want to start by sharing with you a little bit about the resources we're going to talk about today. For this school year, because of all the things that have been happening, we decided to focus very carefully on what's most critical about our World Language Essential Standards and the proficiency-based nature of them as we move forward with our students. So we came up with what we call North Carolina's High Five for our reentry resources. So if you were with us broadcast in July, you've seen some of that. And that High Five, or those 5 main goals, encompass our proficiency-based state standards for world languages, as you can see here. The one we're going to focus on today is number 3. When we think about how students produce language in the interpersonal and presentational modes of communication. Our fall webinar series takes a close look at all of these that you see here on the screen right now, all of NC's High Five, but this one today looks at number 3. With that, I wanted to share with you who created this. You've been hearing me talk. I'm Anne-Marie Gunter at the bottom right of your screen there. I'm the World Languages Consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I am your go-to person for questions about our world language standards and policy and on all of those things. With me today, I have a couple of guest speakers. I have Leslie Baldwin from Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, and Melissa Perez from Durham Public Schools. So you see their Bitmoji pictures as well, and you'll get to hear from them about the different standards we're looking at today a little later. Also, Mara Coe from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and Delinda Ramirez-Carter from Wake County Public School System. All of us work together as a team to put together these resources and the materials and think about what would be most helpful for teachers to use as we're moving into the school year and as we're continuing to build our classes and programs in a variety of ways. We know some of you are working remotely, some are face-to-face, some are in a hybrid mode, and so there's all kinds of configurations that we know that we're implementing the standards in. And so this is the team of folks who put these materials together for you, and you get to hear from a couple of them today, like I said, and they're featured throughout our fall webinar series. All of them work at the district level as world language coordinators. They have different titles, we'll explore that later, but their tasks revolve around implementing the state standards locally with the teachers they have in their districts. So you can, as you can imagine, that's quite a variety. And they wanted to kind of share some of the things they tell their teachers from a more practical standpoint about how to implement our state standards. So we decided this would be a good way to go. Now, I've talked to you a little bit about why or what were the purposes of our reentry resources, but I want to make sure we're all clear on that because it's been sort of an interesting year. First and foremost, whatever we do as far as these broadcasts and the materials that we have on the state website are to help teachers and administrators. Specifically, this year, we wanted to help you bridge potential gaps from spring of 2020. We know that this last school year had kind of an interesting twist. And so there were a lot of things that happened, and teachers really were concerned that there might be learning gaps for students in all of the things that they were learning, including world languages. And so part of these materials are to help bridge those potential gaps. We also wanted to reinforce about how to scaffold content so that students continue to build proficiency in the language they're learning, and they're not going back, for example, and repeating things they missed, or you're trying to rush them through materials, but to think about how can you scaffold the content so they continue to move forward in a pace that works well for everyone. In addition, we want to share best practices in implementing standards-based curriculum, because we know, though there are standards and we all write curriculum based on that, sometimes there are strategies or performance tasks or things like that that we could share across the state that would help everyone. And though that's not part of our state standards documents, it is part of our implementation practices and what we can share with each other through what we call professional generosity. And finally, we want to talk about how to use these resources that we're sharing locally in online courses, in face-to-face courses, or in blended or hybrid classrooms, like we said, because there's all kinds of learning environments happening right now. I know, for example, in October, we're transitioning a lot, and I've heard a lot about people moving back more to some face-to-face or a blended or hybrid version. So again, with all the transition, we want to make sure you have a lot of materials and strategies and things that you can call on to use in your world language classrooms, regardless of which language you teach. With that, we came up with some bridging documents, and those specifically looked at our state standards and our proficiency outcomes for students, K-12 in different programs. So we wanted to talk about moving students across a bridge from where they currently are with their target language proficiency to where they need to be by the end of the grade level or course in this school year. And then we have them for all of our areas. So K-12 classical languages like Latin and ancient Greek, K-12 DLI, or dual language immersion programs, and also K-12 modern language programs, which is where language is taught as a separate subject. So what I'm going to do right now, those documents that we looked at, we want to share those with you again if you don't already have them. I'm going to just put the links in the chat box to everyone. So these documents are on our website. You can download them and use them. For now, what I'm going to do is provide them in the chat box so that you have the links to the Google Drive where they're at, and you can just download what you need. If you want all three, you can. Or if there's one or two that you want to focus on based on what you teach, you can do that as well. So they're in the chat box now. You can click on what you need. All right, looks like everyone has those. So on those, you're going to see some different icons and things that relate specifically to our state standards, and also the alignment we have to our national standards and the national proficiency scale from ACTFL that looks at how students acquire language over time and how learners progress into the proficiency levels. You see on the screen a shot of the inverted pyramid of proficiency from ACTFL, along with our proficiency levels from novice low up through distinguished, actually at the top, although for our state standards, for K-12, we go up through advanced mid in the most advanced program. On those bridging documents, you're going to see coming up on those are icons that we use in our state standards to describe proficiency at different levels. So you see right now the novice level, the very beginning levels, where language is really just memorized words and phrases and putting that together. It's kind of like a parrot. And so in the bridging documents, when students are at the parrot level of proficiency, you'll see a little parrot to remind us that's the level of proficiency we're looking for. After that, we move into the intermediate level of proficiency, which we call the survivor level. And this is where learners can now create with language, so they can put sentences together, ask and answer simple questions, and handle different situations in a real life context. And that's a survivor icon that we have for that. At the advanced level, we have what's called the storyteller. And this is someone who can, with their proficiency in language, narrate and describe all kinds of things. So they can work in the past, the present, and the future. They can talk about details and things like that and handle situations with complications with the language that they have. Now, when you talk about proficiency, we want to emphasize that we're talking about proficiency as determined by what the students can do independently. So if they were outside of your class, what it is they could do with the language they had learned inside of your class. Performance is a different matter. When we're in a classroom and we're getting students to practice the language and all the different communication modes and to think of culture authentically, that's a performance task, and we might be pushing them to use language that they can't quite use independently. But regardless, once they leave our class or the course that they're in, we want them to be at those different proficiency levels that you see here described so that they're ready to continue on and build their proficiency even further. Now, one thing we do also have with our icons on the bridging documents is what we call the little parakeet. And you see that just came up on the screen in the middle. And it looks like a little parrot or parakeet hatching out of an egg. And so when we have beginning programs like exploratory programs or the very beginning levels of language, students they don't really having proficiency yet, but they are working on it. And so they're growing towards being a parrot at the novice level. So those are the kinds of icons you'll see to describe proficiency for the different courses and programs on the bridging documents. Also on the bridging documents, we have references to our 3 modes of communication, as well as culture, intercultural competence. I'm focusing on our 3 modes of communication today because we're looking at 2 of those in very close detail. On the left-hand side, you see we're going to look at interpersonal communication, where students exchange information and ideas, meet their needs and address situations and express and react to and support their opinions in conversations. Interpersonal communication is very informal. It is not rehearsed in any way. And it is the kind of thing that students do when they talk to each other briefly in class, when they text for writing, or when they sign to each other. And it's something, that, again, that is not rehearsed. In contrast, presentational communication, which we're also going to talk about today, has to do with sharing information about their lives, their experiences and events, where they give information about opinions and things they've researched maybe to inform others or describe or explain the situation. And this is where they have rehearsed something. So this presentational communication can happen with speaking, where, for example, a student puts a presentation together that maybe they practiced giving or maybe they write something. Presentational writing is another aspect of this, or maybe they've drafted out something in the language they're learning and then they've gotten feedback, either from you as the teacher or from their peers or others. So we're going to look at interpersonal and presentational communication today. On the right-hand side, we do also have interpretive communication, viewing, listening, and reading. And we do have a webinar in December that focuses just on interpretive communication. So we'll hope you will come back for that. But for today, it's interpersonal and presentational communication. Just real quickly, I wanted to share with you, also in the bridging documents, you'll see references and I can statements. And those I can statements are coming from our necessitable, actful, can-do statements. Obviously, because we have proficiency-based standards, the can-do statements for each proficiency level and sub-level are very helpful to us as a tool that's produced nationally that we use in North Carolina and many other states use in their state standards as well. Specifically on the necessitable, actful, can-do statements, and there's just a screenshot of the interpersonal communication ones here, but they have them for all modes of communication and culture. The mode is up at the top, and then there's a proficiency benchmark that covers those different proficiency ranges like novice, intermediate, advanced, superior, and distinguished. Following that, those are broken down further into language functions. And then they have additional I can statements that you can see then go into the proficiency sublevels of low, mid, and high for novice, intermediate, and advanced. Those come with performance indicators, and those are even further details about the different language functions. And so we have drawn the I can statements on the bridging documents from these necessitable, actful, can-do statements, so they really focus on, for each mode of communication, what a student should know and be able to do by the end of the course or the grade level that they're in with you, based on what you see on bridging documents for the K-12 articulation. So that's the overview of your bridging documents. And like I said, I hope you'll have those in hand. I am seeing some comments, by the way, that people love the icons and the visuals, and that's great. We're happy to hear that. We put those together so that they would be very useful for you and useful for you to share with other teachers, with your students, and maybe even with parents or others who are curious about how we learn languages in the 21st century. I do want to get back though to what we're doing today, which is our high five TEL project goals. I said they were high. There was North Carolina's high five, or 5 main things we're focusing on to make sure we're implementing our state standards. And they are drawn from the TEL project, the Teacher Effectiveness for Language Learning project. Again, it's a national project, just like the successful, actual, can-do statements are. And we focused in on 5 of them that really help us conceptualize what needs to happen in the classroom this school year to make sure we're bridging those gaps and getting students where they need to be. I won't go over all of them, but I will tell you we're focusing on the one about learning environment or learning experience. And that's that one that's in bold, where the, it's the one that just above that, LE4, that talks about teacher providing opportunities for students to produce language in the interpersonal and presentational modes. In our World Language Essential Standards, and here you see a screenshot of that from our administrator guides, obviously our standards and our communication modes plus culture are woven into our strands, and you see those displayed on the screen. The administrator guides are out there to help people outside of world language education understand what our state standards look like. So they are made for people like principals or other administrators who work with us who may not have a world language education background. But what we're going to focus on today is 2 parts of this. Obviously, interpersonal and presentational communication, as I said. So I've highlighted those on the screen and where those are in the weave graphic and how they're woven into what we do in our classrooms. And then, as I said, we're going to focus on LE4 from the TEL project, which talks about a teacher providing opportunities for students to produce language in those 2 different modes of interpersonal and presentational, because you want the students to be using the language and demonstrating to you and themselves that they can use the language effectively. Also look for, as you have on your bridging documents, that interpersonal icon that talks about what interpersonal communication is, and the presentational icon. And so we try to highlight those in this webinar for you. And again, if you want to see the one for culture, you can review the materials from the September broadcast. If you want to see the ones for the interpretive communication, that'll be in our December broadcast. But today, it's interpersonal and presentational. With that, we have gotten to the start of our close look at interpersonal communication, essential standard number 1. Dr. Leslie Baldwin is here with us for that. She's the World Languages Director of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. And we're going to do a little behind the scenes work here. I'm going to hand control over to her so she can show you her screen and control the slides as she walks you through some of the things to think about with interpersonal communication and implementing that in your classroom effectively.
Hi, everyone. I am Leslie Baldwin. As Anne Marie said, I'm the World Languages Director in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. We have languages K-12 in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. We have immersion programs, as well as more traditional middle and high school elective programs. And we have 8 language programs in the district. So there's always something interesting going on. Today, I am talking about the interpersonal mode, and as we know, and as Anne-Marie went over, that is all about exchanging information, and that might be spoken or signed, or it could be in writing. And so we're going to talk about some different aspects of interpersonal communication today. One thing that we want to talk about as we get into this is really providing supports for students to have output, to use the language. And especially at our novice levels, that means that we have to provide a fair amount of support and scaffolding for those students, because if they are at that parrot level, if you think about those images, then what they really have is a lot of memorized language, but they really need help in putting it together and using it for communicative purposes. And so we do things like providing sentence frames. For students, that means we give them sentence starters or question starters to help them in a conversation. We might show them different ways to use the language that they know. We provide what is often called a password, where students kind of memorize a language chunk that they can use. It doesn't mean that they understand the grammar behind everything in that phrase or language chunk that they're using, but they means and they know what it's saying and what it will do for them when they need to express a need or ask a question or respond to one or that kind of thing. And of course, we provide things like word walls. In our current situation, that might mean that you provide different sites or resources to students within Canvas or your learning management system to help them have kind of a word bank, some vocabulary or language to use. And then as they're moving into the intermediate levels, an important thing is to provide transition words, helping students link sentences together so that their either spoken or written language becomes more fluid and more natural, and providing those transition words helps them to do that. So we have to provide these supports in order to help students in the interpersonal mode. You might have things, if you're in the classroom, you might have things on the wall that give them different phrases and reactions they can use in a conversation beyond just that memorized almost memorized dialogue that they've learned for asking, how someone is and answering and how old are they and that sort of thing. That's very normal at the novice level. But what are some other ways that they can react to maybe an opinion that a partner gives or something like that? We can give them options for those types of reactions. And then along the lines of those passwords that are important, I know many teachers have signs like this up in their room. Again, you might have this on a Canvas page or have students have it in their own resources, but common questions or statements that they need to make in the classroom in order to interact with you as the teacher, or maybe to interact with other students in various activities, but this gives them those language chunks, those sentences, those common questions, so that they can stay in the target language and not have to resort to English. So common things for expressing an opinion or saying they need help or don't understand or need a supply of some sort, things like that. There's some of the supports that we can provide in the classroom that help students stay in the language and use interpersonal language for a purpose. And then, of course, there are many ways to practice the interpersonal mode, although certainly we have to acknowledge that in our current teaching situation, and I'm sure that many, if not all of you who are on the webinar today are in some form or fashion teaching virtually, whether it's asynchronous, synchronous, maybe you have some students in school and some at home and it flip-flops. We're certainly in different situations right now. I know for the teachers in Winston-Salem, for Forsyth County right now, interpersonal is fairly difficult because we are still completely virtual and students are at home and they are not in school. So everyone is joining synchronous classes by Zoom or by Teams. And that does present some challenges for the interpersonal mode. However, in the regular classroom, there are other challenges for the interpersonal mode that deal with classroom management and some things like that. But it's certainly an important standard of ours to address, because the whole point in learning a language is to learn how to communicate with others. So we have to practice that and assess that in our classes if it is something that we value. So one way to do this, again, especially for novice level students who need scaffolding and need support, is to use information gap activities. And I'm sure many of you have used these. An information gap means that basically there are two sets of information. Students are in pairs. One student has the person A information and one student has the person B information, and which is slightly different. And they have to ask each other questions and answer those questions in order to fill in their missing information. So if you look at the example that's on this slide, person A has certain information about various countries and what time it is in those countries, but then there are some blanks. Person B has other information about different places and times in those places, and then has blanks, but they are opposite of one another. So where person A has blanks, person B has answers. And where person B has blanks, person A has answers. So they can't show each other the information, and they have to ask those questions. You'll notice on what you would give to students, there are supports. It provides them with the question that they need to ask, the question STEM. In this case, it's in Spanish, and it's asking what time is it in a particular place. And then it helps them with the sentence frame to answer. It's this time, either in the morning or the afternoon or at night, depending upon what the information says. And so this is certainly doable in a face-to-face classroom, even under current social distancing requirements. Students could do an activity like this. It just might be a little bit louder than normal since they're not going to be right next to each other as they talk. They might have a desk in between or something like that. But it could also be done in breakout rooms, in a Zoom synchronous class where you assign a particular information to one person in each pair, and you assign other information to the other person in the pair, and they have to work this out in their breakout room. It takes a little organization on your part on the front end, but it's definitely doable in a synchronous virtual class. Another strategy for the interpersonal mode, I have to give credit to Thomas Soth, a good friend and colleague in Chapel Hill, Carrboro City Schools, for this one. I saw him present this at a conference actually several years ago now, but it's one of the favorite activities I've seen. He was presenting it as an idea for more intermediate level students, but we'll talk about that just a little bit this afternoon. The idea is that it's a spontaneous role play and that students don't really do much to prepare for this other than that they are in pairs. And the teacher, you have some visuals prepared that are famous partners. They could be couples, they could be like superhero partners, like I have Batman and Robin up here. It could be famous two people from a particular current movie, that sort of thing. But you put that visual up of those two people, those two characters, and the students in the pair has to take on those roles and have an impromptu conversation. And so you have a pair and you put up the picture of Bert and Ernie. One person has to be Bert, one person has to be Ernie, and they begin a conversation in those roles. And then you change the picture, you go to another pair of students, they take on that role. It could be obviously people from real life, such as Michelle and Barack, who are down there at the bottom of the slide. It might be cartoons, as represented here. It could be, other live characters from movies or TV shows, whatever might be interesting to your students. And so this is one of those ways in which you need to know the interests of your students, their age level, their grade level, or the kinds of things they might be into that they would find motivating and interesting to talk about. Of course, that spontaneous role play is probably best for more of an intermediate level learner, but at the novice level, they could do this activity as well. It's certainly possible. You would simply have to provide more scaffolding and more supports. It might not be as spontaneous. Maybe a pair is assigned one of these partners, and they have some time to prepare what their dialogue or what their conversation might be. Or maybe you provide some question starters, some sentence starters to help them with what that conversation could be between those two people. So there are some ways to do it at lower proficiency levels, but it might not be as spontaneous, and they might be able to do a little more preparation for their role in that aspect. This activity is from a teacher here in Winston-Salem named Leah Gonzalez, and this is one that she shared with her department in a way that she had found to do the interpersonal mode under our current environment. She felt like had worked really well with her students. And so she creates a Google Doc that has this information that you see in the table on the screen, and these are the instructions that she gives to the students. And then she puts the students in breakout rooms in Zoom. She puts them in breakout rooms, and as they're in the room, they have to ask and answer these questions of each other, and then take notes on their Google Docs. So they have to note who they spoke to and what that person said. She gives them a couple of minutes in the breakout room to do that, and then she switches the breakout rooms. So what she basically does is, in Zoom, she looks at the breakout rooms. She takes a student from breakout room 1, moves that student to breakout room 2. She takes a student from breakout room 2, moves that student to breakout room 3, and so forth and so on, so that pairs are different each time. And she switches the rooms about 5 times so that they have multiple opportunities to speak with students, to speak with peers, and to speak with different peers. And then they have their Google Doc, and they report on what they learned, who they talked to, which allows them to practice some different pronouns and different forms. But they've had these conversations with multiple people, and she's found that to work well, partially because of the accountability of the Google Doc and the constant mixing of the groups. There are, of course, many ways to work on the interpersonal mode. As I've said, you can use breakout rooms if you are teaching virtually and have synchronous sessions with students. As we've said, you might provide common questions. You might use discussion boards. This could be in Canvas. If you use Canvas or in other platforms, you can have written discussions in a discussion board. You can do activities such as the Find Someone Who, kind of that people bingo type activity. Google Hangouts is another way to do a breakout room if you're not in Zoom. If you are using Teams, my understanding is that Teams will have breakout room capability very soon. We mentioned the InfoGap activity, of course, interviews and role plays. And remember that conversation partners can come from multiple places. Of course, they could be classmates, but they could be peers from another class, from another level, from another grade span. It might be heritage speakers somewhere else. It doesn't always have to be students that are in that particular class. There are many tools that can be used for the interpersonal mode. These are, of course, just a few. One thing I will say about some of these is that in our current situation, if you do not have students face-to-face and you're only teaching virtually, I think one thing that we have to do is recognize that, use what we have, and get as close to real conversations as we can, as close to the real definition of the interpersonal mode as we can, but also maybe make some tweaks where we need to get as close as we can to the interpersonal mode, since there are definite challenges if you are completely virtual. So for instance, you might use Flipgrid, in which students record videos. Well, if all they do is record their video and their speech, that's presentational, right? But there is that comment feature in Flipgrid where students can record commentary responses to other students' videos. And so if you have them do that in some way where they have to go back and forth with their videos and provide comments, maybe answer questions, maybe ask other ones, then it becomes more of an interpersonal activity. Now, many will say it's not truly interpersonal because they could possibly prepare their responses. It's not completely impromptu. However, given our current format of teaching, I would count it as interpersonal, and I think it can work in that way. The other thing with Flipgrid, if you use that tool, you can also use Grid Pals within Flipgrid to find a classroom somewhere else in the world with which to communicate through Flipgrid. And so that could be a great way to partner up with a class in a target country that also wants to practice their language skills. Maybe they want to practice their English skills, and you want your students to practice their Spanish or French or German skills. And through the Grid Pals and Flipgrid, you can find a community with which to communicate. Of course, using Google Voice, slides, documents, and using the comment feature there so that students can, again, ask and answer questions in a written form can work. Padlet could be a written interpersonal in which you can post comments, but then again, just like with Flipgrid, except Flipgrid is spoken, in Padlet, you can allow for participants to comment on the different little Post-it notes that are put there. So again, that could be sort of a pseudo written interpersonal. Linked is a site that allows you to record spoken prompts and allows students to record responses. So that can work. We're going to talk about this fake texting in just a second. Vocaroo, a way some of my teachers are recording what students do in breakout rooms. And so while you can't actually record a breakout room in Zoom, what some of my teachers have done is the students go to the breakout rooms, they take out their earbuds so that they're using the speaker on their Chromebook or their laptop or whatever they have, and they use Vocaroo to record the conversation that they have. It provides an easy link to send to the teacher that has the recording of the conversation. And that's been one way that that some teachers I know have found in this environment to record conversations. Wiser also allows for spoken prompts and spoken recorded responses that students can give. So again, those might not be completely spontaneous, but it is a way to get some kind of exchange going. We just have a couple of minutes before moving on to the next piece, but I wanted to show, hang on, whoops, wrong one. I wanted to show this site, but I can't get to it because of this menu. There we go, okay. All right, so this is called iFakeText.com. I'm hoping you can see that on the screen. I'm thinking you can.
Yes, it's clear. Go ahead.
Good. I can't see the chat box because of the way I'm sharing my screen. So if there's something I need to know, Anne Marie, you pop in. And so with this tool, you can have students create basically a text conversation, and they can have a little fun with this. So what I am going to ask is that two people be volunteers. And so whichever two people put your names in the chat box first, you two are the volunteers. Cecilia? I was going to play with Cecilia. Come on, it's easy. I promise. All you're going to do is put a couple things in the chat box. And I'll, okay. So Cecilia, put in the chat box who this text is going to be coming from. So we'll keep it at mom, and we'll keep carrier and all that stuff the same. And what we're going to do is change this conversation. So Alexa, what is mom saying? Where are you? All right. Celia, how are you responding to mom? At home, missing you. Okay. And Alexa, what are you saying back to that? Sounds like something I would say. Okay. And what's the response? Celia? Okay, frown face. All right, so we have our little conversation going on here, and when I click submit, then we have this cool looking little fake text that was created. and it can easily be, you can see the various ways it can be shared. There's a link right here that students could share with the teacher. So this is the way they could do a written interpersonal. Maybe they're in a breakout room and they come up with what it is. Again, it's not perfectly spontaneous, but could be fun and engaging for students. And it's sort of, can be kind of a quasi interpersonal. And of course, it's free. So there are two tools here on this slide that do that. They basically work about the same way. So that is it for interpersonal, and I am going to share the control with Melissa.
Hang on just a second before we pass the control to Melissa. First of all, there's a lot of things in the chat box saying how much people enjoyed seeing that cool tool. That's how they've been saying it, and all the other ideas and activities that they could do with interpersonal. Now, we do have one question that's come up that I think we need to answer for interpersonal as well as presentational at the end of presentational when Melissa does that. And that question is, how can we get over the fact that students are scared to speak in public? So what are some things that you would suggest for lowering that affective filter and getting students over the fact that they're scared often to speak, whether it's in public or just in general with the target language they're learning?
Sure. And it's a great question. But really what you just said, Anne-Marie, about the affective filter is the key. And that's all in how you set up the culture of your classroom, right? You as the teacher have to set that culture where it is a comfortable space, where it's okay to make mistakes and sound silly sometimes. And you might have to explain to students, we're learning something new. Things are going to sound funny. You're going to say things that you think sound funny, and you're not going to be sure of what you're doing all the time. But it's important to try, right? And to kind of set up that environment where it's okay to try and it's okay to make a mistake. I think it helps often. Sometimes the tools such as Flipgrid help with that because students are recording a video, and then when they finish, they can even use some of the little icons and things in Flipgrid to cover up their face if they want to. So it ends up just being, it's a video, but you're not seeing their face, and that helps kind of the shy ones do this part but hide behind it. In the virtual setting, doing the breakout rooms is helpful because it's not one student speaking to a whole entire class. That might be a little nerve-wracking, but they're just in a smaller group speaking. Maybe they need to practice more with the teacher before they're comfortable with a student, or maybe you need to be careful about how you pair the students together so that you know that someone who is really shy is with a student who will be more understanding of that and will help that student rather than make fun of them. But it really is about setting up that environment in the classroom to lower the affective filter so that students find it okay to try.
Great. Thank you so much for that insight for interpersonal communication. And I think now we can start to transition over to Melissa. Melissa Perez is the K-12 Cultural and Linguistic Development Specialist for Durham Public Schools. She's been in that role for a while, although she just got a new title recently, as did Leslie this year. So their tasks, I think, are expanding a little bit and are more inclusive of a number of language kinds of things that happen in their districts and schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Melissa Perez. Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you, Leslie. As Anne-Marie stated, I do have a new title this year. While I'm still all things world languages, I am the Cultural and Linguistic Development Coordinator because I have taken on some other roles with other things as it relates to some translation interpreting, as I'm certified to do that, as well as with some things with dual language immersion and some other projects that we have going on district-wide as well. And I would like to thank Anne-Marie for having me this afternoon. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will continue on with the presentational mode of communication. So with this standard, the teacher provides opportunities for students to produce language in presentational mode, which we have presentational speaking and presentational writing. So what we have here listed are some strategies. I'm going to share some strategies and activities today to help you hopefully be able to better facilitate that and be able to accomplish that in your classroom. So our high five for this, to produce language in the presentational mode, the teacher will facilitate activities that allow students to interact, negotiate meaning for real world purposes, as well as allow students to produce language within their performance targets within the range. And you as the teacher will provide strategies that enable them to stay in the target language. And then this includes presenting information about their life experiences, events, being able to state preferences and opinions, debates, persuasive argument, inform, describe, and explain. So in the presentational mode, we do have presentational speaking and presentational writing. There are two ways that we can share information. This is different from interpersonal communication because we are just presenting information. We are not having that one-on-one spontaneous communication as we do in interpersonal. With the presentational mode, it's important that we provide learners the support they need to be able to apply the language learning. So when we have a growth mindset, these are some things that can help us move through that. The language ladder that provides the memorized chunks and shows different ways to say the same sort of thing, as well as sentence frames, as Leslie was talking about earlier. So it gives them a starting point. Some students sort of just draw a blank when it comes time for them to present anything, and they're just like, and it's kind of like a deer in a headlight kind of syndrome thing. But if we provide them some sentence frames and some structures to pull from, that facilitates that for them to be able to speak or to be able to write those things. In the teacher understanding of input to output, useful phrases, learned, memorized chunks. That's why it's so important that when we're teaching that we chunk the materials in digestible pieces for students so that they can get those things and use those useful phrases that we want and need them to be able to use every day. In their understanding of proficiency and performance, word walls can be particularly helpful when they're posted in the classroom and use pictures as well as the target language, and then also having transition words so that students can take their small, simple sentences and be able to connect them to make longer sentences and paragraphs that will extend their speaking and writing abilities. So supporting target language with sentence frames, we have some examples up here of what that may look like for student output. And you can see it gives them little pieces of the sentence. We have a compare and contrast example, as well as oftentimes it's helpful to provide like the subject and the verb, or at the very least the verb, because I think a lot of times a lot of students get hung up just because of the question Leslie was speaking to earlier about being comfortable in speaking, and then they're going to make a mistake or they're going to make an error. So if they get really caught up in the whole grammar, well, I'm not sure how to conjugate that verb, or I'm not sure how to say that. So if we can at least give them that piece, that they tend to be able to add some vocabulary words and kind of extend that sentence a little further with things that they know and remember. With looking at supporting target language with student output with word walls, we have a couple different word walls here, and we see that we have the vocabulary word and the target language as well as visual. And we can grow those and continue to grow those throughout the year, so students constantly have a reminder, something that they can sit around, and when they're trying to speak and when you're encouraging them to speak in the classroom when we are face-to-face, that they can pull from that. You can also make kind of mini word walls. I've seen some teachers do in our current remote environment where You can use the whiteboard, like for example in Zoom, like the whiteboard feature where you can type in some sentence frames up there or some vocabulary words up there. You can also use, like for example, whatever slide presentation that you're using. You can provide a little mini word wall for a lesson and have that as your background, or if you don't, you can show that on your screen with your kind of your face in the corner as you're speaking to be able to, for them to be able to have a little word wall or a little reference as you're going through your synchronous sessions online. You could also, I've seen a couple of teachers create a word wall within their Canvas, and in Durham Public Schools, Canvas is our LMS. So whatever your LMS is, creating a word wall within that. So as students are moving through their asynchronous materials, they're also able to have a word wall as a reference. We also use anchor charts, grammar supports posted in the classroom when we're face-to-face, where we have like little reminders about grammar, right? We have like these little grammar mini breaks where students can refer back to these things. So again, I know in a virtual environment, we have to make that look a little different, and you kind of have those same options that I just mentioned around a word wall. So you can use the whiteboard option in Zoom or presenting, or a slide that you could present and put it either as your background or either in your presentation mode when you're sharing your screen, and as you're teaching your lesson online if you're doing remote. We also have transition words, as I mentioned before, and here we have examples of both French and Spanish transitional words that could be posted, again, using that whiteboard option or slide option, or if you're face-to-face, you can have those sorts of things posted in your classroom. I also wanted to share and talk a little bit about some other kind of go-to ideas for both face-to-face and talk about how, and online, and how we can make just a few minor little switches and how you can do those things online as well. So another idea for presentational, these are all strategies and activity ideas for the presentational mode of communication. You can have students create a comic strip around whatever topic or theme you would like. And I listed a tool here that you can use. It's actually an app that students can download and use to create a comic strip, and it's called the Strip Designer. And I know Anne-Marie later on always posts the recordings and the materials that go with the recording. So you'll actually, when she does that, be able to access these from the NCDPI World Languages Google website. Another way or a strategy to use for presentational would be producing an iMovie. And if you've not seen iMovies, you can do all kinds of really cool animation and things. You can add your Bitmoji, you can do all kinds of things in an iMovie for students to use, and they are able to get in with a few more kind of tech tools. So this would actually work for both face-to-face and virtual, because they would have access to these tech tools. So they would work for either or. We can also have students write or speak about a specific scenario. And I'm going to share a scenario here. This is a Spanish 4 example with a proficiency level of intermediate mid. And it talks about making these scenarios really relevant to students so that they're more engaging. They capture students' interest in something that could potentially happen to them in real life. So they're taking a geography course and study abroad in Spain during the junior year, and then in the class, they're studying Latin America, and the teacher asks the student to select a different country in the area. They do research on climate and geography and then present the findings to the class. And you could actually, when they do the presentations, you could, to kind of lower the anxiety, as Leslie mentioned earlier, you can have them present to breakout groups, or you could have them do it, of course, the whole class. But again, it just depends on your class, whatever you like to do, however your students would feel more comfortable. Making just a general presentation for whatever project that you have listed or have in mind for whatever vocabulary or themes, unit themes you happen to be working on at the moment. I have several things listed here that students can use to make presentations. whether it's Google Slide, a Prezi, a Haiku deck, a Keynote, a PowerPoint. All of those things can be used to make a presentation. And with the tools that I have listed, clearly there are 1,000,001 tech tools out there. But one sort of little word of advice I would recommend is try to keep a manageable list. If you present all 1,001 options to your students, then that can be a little overwhelming. And you don't want the tech piece of it to get in the way of them actually being able to do the project. So it needs to be a tech tool that's, user friendly and that they can easily learn how to use, and it's kind of intuitive, because you don't want them to get lost and I don't know how to use this tech tool, and then they never actually get to doing the assignment that you want them to do. Another activity for the presentational mode of communication that you may consider is writing a story or having students write a book, or it could be in pairs or in groups. Storybird is a great tool for that, as well as the Book Creator, which is an app you can download. And I have those linked here as well. So again, once Anne-Marie posts these things, you'll be able to click on them, or you can just Google them at any time and it'll bring it up. Recording short videos based on a determined scenario, whatever, again, engaging, relevant, 21st century, like affects their life, that they're going to be engaged in, kind of want to participate in, are always good things to consider whenever you're creating these scenarios. I do have one linked here that I will share. This one is from Spanish 3. We have our learning targets about describing relationships in life, characteristics of a good friend and a bad friend, and describing the ideal relationship. So it says that the Spanish teacher is passionate about learning Spanish and would like more students at Providence Day to study language. Providence Day is the name of this particular school. She has convinced our principal that there should be a Spanish language news report on the topic that can be shown at an assembly. And so each has been given a topic for a video report, and theirs is high school relationships, and it gives a list of what the video should include. So those are is one small example of some things that you can do that they could record a video on. It could literally be anything, any topic you want them to record a video on. Now, there are lots of tools to record videos. You can use Screencastify, you can use Flipgrid, you can use all kinds of things out there to record a video with. Flipgrid, I know, is really popular now. I know a lot of my teachers use Flipgrid. I use Flipgrid sometimes in my professional development, but there are lots of different tools, whichever one you like and is easiest to use. You can have students generate speaking. Again, this particular idea helps with lowering that affective filter in the classroom, because students don't have to show their face because they do it through an avatar. And Voki provides an opportunity to create avatars. I guess if there's any kind of holdback at all on this one, or students a lot of times get really into developing the avatar, so much so that they take forever and they spend more time creating the avatar than they should, because then they lose the time on the project. But at least this is an opportunity for them to still be able to speak and to be able to present in that presentational mode, but not have to feel so nervous about it because it's an avatar and not their actual face. Another idea is to create a story around an event by blending students' own words with something that was reported. So this is a cool way to bring in all kinds of current events, because there's a lot of current events happening nowadays, and bring that into the classroom to talk about that in the target language, and for students to be able to get something that interests them. And now, of course, you would put your own parameters around that. Like maybe you want to have it from a particular country, or have students in groups do it from different countries. You could kind of put your own rules around that. And then it's another way to also get them in the practice for, because we hear a lot about, when students get ready to write something, about plagiarism and things like that. So this is a great practice for them, that when they start writing all those essays and papers and stuff, in their language arts and in college, that they have good practice about putting stuff in their own words. So that's another great benefit to that particular idea. Students can make a poster. Canva is a cool tool to use for that because you can do all kinds of neat things in Canva. If you haven't checked Canva out, I highly recommend it, and it's easy to use. Another activity, and this one is super simple, like short and sweet, is called beginning, middle, end. So I thought I'd kind of just give you an overview of what that might look like. So in that activity, students would examine an image. The teacher would provide some sort of image or artwork that's culturally authentic and has an emotional element to it. And then the image could be something from a current event. It could literally be anything. And they need to connect to a topic, whatever it is that you're studying. And then you're going to ask your students to imagine or to comment on what happened before, like whatever is pictured in that image, what happened before whatever is happening there, to comment what is happening in the image, and then also to predict what might happen after this scene that's in this image. So then students have the opportunity to consider pattern and to make connections. So this is like a visible thinking routine, and it works for both speaking and writing. So it could be used for either or, and helps develop storytelling skills as well. When you're thinking about this, it could be synchronous, it could be asynchronous. You would show the image and you can ask students to answer orally, ask some questions about it, or if you, whatever questions you have about it, you can have them write their answers as well. So that one is really great because it works for both presentational pieces and also synchronous and asynchronous. So the next activity that I wanted to mention is the Freyer Square. And all of you, I'm sure, are probably familiar with the Freyer Square, and that is just the 4-section graphic organizer tool that we've all seen before. And it can be used to gain deeper understanding of vocabulary and concepts because it requires the students to define a term in their own words and then give characteristics of that term and give examples, but not just examples, because they also have to give non-examples that explain the meaning as well. So this is a really good tool to help students think critically, to make connections between their prior learning and the new concepts. And with this analyzing and synthesizing that they're doing, so we're further up Bloom's taxonomy with that as well in the critical thinking and being able to put things in their own words. When we think about distance learning, this can be done synchronously and asynchronously as well, so it's very versatile. But if it's synchronous, the teacher would take that opportunity to sort of model their thinking aloud as they fill out an example Freyer Square for the students. So then have a digital copy of the Freyer template. It can be done. A tool that I'm really into using these days that I really like that's super easy and fun is Jamboard. So you could use Jamboard to do that. You could use Google Slides, Google Docs, or Padlet, any online tool that you prefer. If it's asynchronous, you would, and since you wouldn't have that opportunity to do that sort of example Freyer model for the students, you would create a video of yourself modeling that thinking and filling out one, and kind of post that into your Canvas course or your Google Classroom or whatever LMS you're using, and have students preview that prior to completing the Freyer activity. So the next one that I have mentioned here is the carousel brainstorm. And this gives us students an opportunity to share their ideas about a topic or a theme before you begin a unit. So they share their ideas, they share knowledge, they develop sort of a shared knowledge base related to whatever activity or theme you plan to study. Now, this one would be a synchronous activity. So you would create several questions or statements related to whatever topic it is, and then put each question or statement in a slide. So and then give all your students an opportunity to be able to edit it. So you would have to put your shared settings so that they could all have an opportunity to edit, and then divide the class into groups. And then the group should equal the number of questions. And then you have each student or each group of students answer each question blank. You would give a certain amount of time, and you would make sure that each group is sort of writing or typing with a different color font so that they all have the opportunity to kind of carousel and go around to each question. You know, when the timer goes off, they would move around. They would answer a different question to make sure that each group answers each question that the teacher has listed. The jigsaw, which I'm sure a lot of you have used jigsaw. So the purpose of this is to comprehend and infer meaning from a text by becoming an expert on a certain portion of it, not the whole thing. And then the second thing is to share information with the classmates. And a text could be a literal text that they read, but keep in mind that a text is not always something that we read. A text can also be an image, right? It's what can we read from that image? So keep that in mind as well, especially for your novice low learners, because we know that there's a limited amount of vocabulary and things that they could read to understand. So you could definitely have them do this with an image that's related to whatever target language that you teach. This is also would be a synchronous activity because you would be dividing them an authentic text into chunks or to parts, and then assign each group or pair, however you have them in twos or threes for each particular chunk, read it, unpack it, become experts on it, and then report it back so that everybody learned the whole thing, but doesn't necessarily have to quote unquote read the whole thing. And the way you would do that with an image is perhaps divide the image into quadrants. Like, let's say you have an image and you divide it into 4 quadrants, or you could do more, and then have each group take a quadrant and see what they want to report out, or their version of how their quadrant affects the whole image. So the next and final activity that I have listed here is called a whip around. And what I have linked, because you can tell that there's something linked there to the whip around, is actually a little guide, like a strategy guide for you to be able to do the activity. So you could read through that and the steps and the instructions around it. The whip around is actually a closure activity, and you don't have to prepare anything for it. So that's cool. It saves time, right? But it gives you, as the teacher, information on depth and quality of student learning at the end of your lesson. So kind of like an exit ticket kind of alternative. So you ask an open-ended question to the class, and it's based on the objective of the lesson or today's lesson, and have students write down their thoughts on a piece of paper. So kind of like an exit ticket. And once they've written their answers, though, they pair up to share it with the partner. And then after a couple of minutes, the teacher whips, quote unquote whips, that's how it got whip around, right? Or walks around, or you can visit in, if you're doing online, into the breakout once they're in their partners. And you call on the students to share their thoughts. So you ask the students about what they talked about, and they should not give the same response as their classmate, and then provide the students the opportunity to pass on responding if you so choose, and then go on to the next person. So online, you would ask them to type their thoughts on a note. It could be like a Padlet you could use for this. Again, you could use Jamboard. You could even probably use the chat box if you would like, to have them respond online. And then after they've written their answers, they're put into pairs and sent to breakout rooms. And after a couple of minutes, you bring them back, and then you can start calling on the groups and talk about what they discussed. So these are, again, just a few strategies that you could use in your classroom to do presentational communication. Making posters and infographics for supporting students in presentational communication we have listed here. Some more tools, some of these I've already mentioned, like I mentioned Canva a moment ago, and Google Slides with G Suite. But MindMeister is a great one for them creating mind maps. Pictochart is a really cool resource as well. And then of course we have our PowerPoint, which has been around for a while. It just depends on what tools you like best. But again, I would say be careful, don't use too many, because we don't want the students to get lost in how to use the tech tool and not get around to what we're actually trying to get them to do with the tech tool. And then in terms of them, again, being able to present, it's 100% true what Leslie said about the culture that you create in the classroom to lower that affective filter so students feel comfortable to present in the classroom. How you have that set up. I know when I was in the classroom, I had a sign up in my classroom that said, there are no mistakes, only learning opportunities. So just setting that culture in your classroom that students, there are no mistakes. It's just learning opportunity. That's how we learn. That's how we get better. That's how we become more proficient in the language, and just keep encouraging that as they go through and acknowledging responses. Like even like, let's say it's a synchronous class and students are giving responses, and students give a response that's not correct or it's not what we're looking for, that you still acknowledge that response and don't ever say anything to make them feel like that, so that they would not contribute anymore. Like, hey, that's a great thought. Thank you so much for that. Would anybody like to add anything, for example, so that, or to kind of redirect them or say, do we have any other thoughts, or can someone help them out? There are all kinds of things you can do to kind of like a positive reinforcement, even though it's not, they may not give the answer that you're looking for. And just being conscious of that, and then making it clear that, in this classroom, we encourage each other and we presume positive intent. And that way you set up that whole culture around, nobody making fun of each other or laughing, even though sometimes maybe what comes out of our mouth sounds super silly and we haven't heard anything like that before. That's all part of the learning process. So that depends on the teacher, and beginning that from the very first day that they're in your classroom and that you begin to have time with your students. So overall, there are a lot of different ideas. Like I know particularly in our unit maps for our curriculum, we do have performance tasks or IPAs, and a lot of those have the different modes of communication, and then we're having to adapt those down, but they give those sort of real life, real world scenarios for students to be able to engage. And then teachers, of course, are creating their own projects and ideas in addition to those, because those are sort of culminating activities at the end of a unit where they do as they go. So they are preparing students to be able to get there. Some other tools for presentational are Flipgrid, which we've already mentioned, GoAnimate, which is another kind of alternative to Voki, because you get a picture of an animal and you can outline its mouth and make the animal talk for you. So again, that sort of lowers the affective filter as well. Screencastify, which I mentioned, which is a great tool if you're looking for a flipped idea as well, so that you can record yourself teaching something, or for students to be able to use for a presentational tool. Voki we've already mentioned, and then also WeVideo. These are all tools that are effective for the presentational mode of communication. Book Creator is an app which I mentioned a moment ago as well. Fakebook, and Fakebook is like where you go and create a fake Facebook profile in the target language, and you can have students do that. Storybird, I already mentioned. Story Jumper, which works a little bit similar in terms of creating a story. And then there's a trading card creator from Read, Write, Think, listed at the link there, that is also an effective tool as well. So at this time, I will turn it back over to Anne Marie and let her continue with today's presentation.
Great. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Leslie, as well, for all of the great information you shared around our two standards that we're talking about, interpersonal communication and presentational communication, as well as all the digital tools and classroom ideas that you talked about. I don't know if you've seen in the chat, but there are a lot of people talking about what they're going to use right away, how much they appreciated learning about certain tools that they could use already for things that they do, and maybe hadn't thought of a good digital tool yet. So there are several people saying they have book projects they do in level 1 and 2 classes, and they like the idea of using like Storyboard for that to do digital book writing. There's also people talking about the different strategies you missed, the FRAIR model, and using those in new ways maybe they hadn't thought of before in their world language classroom. A couple people noted that some of these tools are also used in ELA and ESL classes, and that makes sense, of course. That's all about language, whether it's the English language or a world language, so it makes sense that we could use the same tools. And also people were mentioning some other tools that we'll kind of add to the list, so that'll be great. I'll go ahead and take over from here and close us out a little bit. Some of you are asking where these materials are going to be and how you would access them. We're actually going to talk about that here in a moment. All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so we're going to wrap up today with some reminders and announcements for everyone. First things first, I want to talk to you about where you find some of the digital tools and other materials that we've been talking about in these broadcasts. We have a whole space on the World Languages website called Teaching World Languages Remotely. It has a resource bank, its own bit.ly link, as you can see there. And most recently, for this series of webinars, this fall webinar series, we have added this Digital Tools by Communication Mode link. And so I want to go over and show you where that's at so that you can see that some of these digital tools we've been talking about are in fact ready and waiting for you there. So if I just click on the link here on the slide, we go out to our Teaching Remotely web pages. It's under Resources, by the way, so if I just mouse over the Resources button at the top, you see that it drops down to Teaching Remotely. A lot of the materials that we've been using since July are here, including this new one that says Digital Tools by Communication Mode. If you click on that, it takes you to the page where those tools, for example, the interpersonal digital tools are listed that Leslie talked about. You see them all listed there from the slides. And then if you scroll further down, because they're in order, of course, you get to the presentational digital tools that Melissa just talked about, starting with the materials you would use to maybe set up things for your classroom itself, maybe word walls and things like that, as well as the presentational speaking and presentational writing tools that she spoke about, and using those in different ways. Obviously, some of these overlap between the different communication modes or standards, as we saw today, but they're all linked up here where they were mentioned, and we will add some of the others that were shared in the go-to ideas, as well as in the chat box from other people who use tools as well that they find successful with those standards. So keep in mind that's always there for you, and we continue to add materials to that, and also check and make sure that we have the right web addresses and things so that you can get to what you need. Also, I always like to remind everyone that we have a K-20 PD or professional development list page under the professional development tab on the website. This is where information about all kinds of upcoming PDs. These broadcasts, things from our professional organizations that are either general or language specific are posted. And so there are links to conferences, institutes, meetings, online courses, webinars, workshops, and all of that actually through spring 2021. On the left-hand side, we have a quick screenshot of everything coming up almost through the end of October. There's a lot going on in October. So there's a lot listed there, as you can see. You can always go to the K-20 PD list page with the link on this slide, and you'll have access to these slides. And you can sign up for our World Language Instructors listserv using that bit.ly/ncdpi updates link so that you get reminders and announcements on the listserv right in your email box. Also, For our PD, the World Language Webinar Series for the fall, as you know, is about implementing our World Language Essential Standards. We have finished the first two, you can see, but the next one coming up on Wednesday, December 16th will be from 4 to 5, and it's on Essential Standard number 2, the Interpretive Communication Standard. So reading, listening, and viewing. The archives of all of our webinar series, including the slides, a recording of the broadcast, any links we use, and the handouts, are posted within 1 week on the webinar series information page. That's under professional development. It has its own space on the website so that you can get to all of those materials and use them locally. Also, in our World Language Webinar Series, we have additional ones coming up in the winter. Where we're going to be looking at our World Language Essential Standards structure and those proficiency outcomes, as you can see in January and February. And then in the spring, we continue looking at sort of the milestones with our state standards and how we use our state standards for advocacy. And that'll be in March and May. When you go to that webinar series information page where the archives are posted, there are also links, registration links for these upcoming webinars there. Also, don't forget our national professional organization, ACTFL, the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages, is having its conference virtually in November on the 20th through the 22nd. We encourage everyone to take a look at the ACTFL website under the Convention Expo tab for details about the conference, including keynote speakers, pre-conference workshops, the online convention program, and registration information that might be helpful to you. That's it, and I see we have some time for any final questions, but for our wrap-up and questions, don't forget, as I said, the archives from this broadcast will be posted on our webinar series information page within the next week. Sometimes I get them posted quite quickly within 24 to 48 hours of the broadcast, and might have them by the end of the week. The archives do include a recording. The slides you've seen in 3 formats. I post them as Google Slides, PowerPoint slides, and PDF slides, so that you can easily get to them and access them the way you need, or even repurpose the slides for your own local presentations to your teams or departments or schools or districts. Also, don't forget, individuals who participate in our live broadcast today do earn a contact hour certificate for licensure renewal. That contact hour certificate will come in the form of an email with the attached certificate approximately 2 weeks from today. You never know how long it might take to get everything processed through, but the person we have in charge of that is usually pretty quick on the turnaround. I like to give the 2-week guarantee, so look for it then. As with any professional development, local education agencies or districts and charter schools, also called public school units or PSUs, must approve professional development offerings. So you can take your certificate to whoever you usually do to get that approved. And that's it. I just want to make sure I left you with the information about where our NCDPI World Languages website is at, the bit.ly/NCDPIWL. You have my contact information. Again, my name is Anne-Marie Gunter, my email and phone number, and then, of course, a place to show where on the website we post our materials so that you can get to them. That's all we have for today. We thank you for joining us. And again, thank you to both Leslie and Melissa for sharing about our state standards and about all of the ideas and things that they use with their teachers to make sure that they have the digital tools to implement those in their classrooms, whether they're teaching online, face-to-face, or in some kind of blended or hybrid learning environment. Let me go ahead and check real quick on our chat box, see if we have any questions or anything to respond to. See a lot of thank yous, and again, thank you to our guest speakers today. I see some people saying they're excited about some of the digital tools that were shared today by Leslie and Melissa, because they're going to take those back to their PLCs, their professional learning communities, or PLTs, professional learning teams, and share them right away to think about how they could use those to support students learning and practicing the language that they're learning. All right, that looks like we've got all of our questions from the chat box. Let me just check our Q&A box. In WebEx, which is what we're using now for our broadcasts, they put things in different places. And as I said before, to some of you, you sometimes access it in different ways, depending on what browser or app or website you use to get to our presentation. All right. And I've got a note that someone would like me to add the bit.ly link for the World Languages website to our chat box, I'd be happy to do that. Give me just a moment. Let me pop out of this so that I can get the full link. And I will put that in both the chat box and the Q&A so that you can get to it. And then everyone has that. And can do it. All right, so those should be out there. All right, I'm looking again for any questions or last minute things that we need to do. I think we are good to go. I will go ahead and stop our recording.